Welcome to the Draper Library Complex for our second speaker series. And just really excited about the speakers that we have this evening. And I get the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce the first one. And so that is in the person of Dr. Ivy R. Taylor. Dr. Taylor is a distinguished public servant, educator, and leader whose work bridges civic leadership and higher education. A proud North Carolina connected leader, Dr. Taylor earned her master's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and now serves in leadership roles supporting public leadership across our state. Her commitment to strengthening communities through education and opportunity continues to make an impact here in North Carolina. Nationally, Dr. Taylor made history as mayor of San Antonio, becoming the first African American woman to lead a U.S. city with more than 1 million residents. I'm gonna have to clap for that. Yes. Her tenure was marked by a strong focus on economic mobility, workforce development, and expanding opportunity for underserved communities. This is a bad chick right here. I didn't know this. Okay, wait. She later served as the 12th president of Russ College, where she was the first woman to lead the historically Black institution, further demonstrating her lifelong dedication to education and leadership development. Dr. Taylor also holds degrees from Yale University, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and University of Pennsylvania, and continues to inspire leaders across the country. Dr. Taylor resides in North Carolina with her husband Rodney, who's with her this evening, and their daughter Morgan. She remains deeply involved in community engagement and mentoring. Let me see what's on the other side. Let me see now. She may not want me to tell, but I'm gonna tell a little bit more. So Dr. Taylor was born and raised in Queens, New York, to parents who migrated from Wilmington, North Carolina. And she was the first in her family to attend college. So we talked about San Antonio and Russ College. Okay, I think I got all the highlights. And I know, I've just been very impressed with Dr. Taylor. She and I have met on several occasions. She's a joy and also a great source of inspiration for me. And, please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Ivy R. Taylor.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
How are y'all doing today?
Good.
Well, I am excited to have the opportunity to be with you. I always am excited about Black History Month. So let's go ahead and jump right in on your theme, A Century of Black History Commemorations, Reflections on Our Journey. Now, the Century of Black History Commemorations, that's the national theme because we've been celebrating since 1926. So that's a nice long period. But even though we've been celebrating since 1926, only in 1976 did a U.S. president acknowledge Black History Month. And then I think it was in 86 when the Congress issued a proclamation making it official. But it's been official in our hearts for a whole 100 years, right? So when I was given the theme for today's event, my mind went to a personal journey. All right, you see these lovely women here? Specifically my 3 grandmothers, Ruth, Jessie Mae, and Hattie Mae. I have a bonus grandmother from my stepfather who raised me from the age of 5. And so Ruth was born in Leland, North Carolina, and spent the majority of her adulthood in Wilmington, the big city of Wilmington, North Carolina. Jessie Mae was born in Wilmington, and she went north to New York City in her 20s and lived there until the age of 90. And Hattie Mae was born in South Carolina, but she moved to Trenton, New Jersey for economic opportunities in the 1960s. These women were all born basically a century ago, 1922, 1919, and 1921. Their lives reflect that historic journey and the present day impact of Black achievement, culture, and resistance. None of them did anything extraordinary enough to land them in any history books, but they provided the foundation that allowed me to achieve a few things that Mayor Fushi just mentioned that have been noted in a few history books. But before I get into that, let's reflect a little bit more on their journeys. This photo shows my mud deer. I call her the original mud deer. About Tyler Perry, but mud deer, Ruth Hall Davis. She was a domestic worker for a white family in Wilmington, a doctor. Now, while I only have a photo of Madeir actually at work, both Jessie Mae and Hattie Mae were also domestic workers. They both worked in white families' homes, but Jessie Mae also eventually got a union job, which was a big deal. She got a union job cleaning office buildings in New York City in the evening. So she would take the train from her apartment in Queens into Manhattan, clean office buildings at night, and come back home on the train at about 11 o'clock at night, and then walk her dog at 11 o'clock at night. She worked really hard. Hattie Mae worked for rich families in New Jersey. Now, none of these women graduated from high school, though Madeir did work on her GED when she was maybe in her late 70s or early 80s. She didn't finish it, but it was an admirable effort. Their education was not a priority or even much of a possibility with their family circumstances at the time. I remember being in college and meeting a friend who casually mentioned to me that her grandmother had attended Wilberforce University, an HBCU that you may have heard of. And I recall actually being shocked. I'd never heard of an educated grandmother before. It was not a part of my family's history. I wonder what that must have been like to have a grandparent who was educated through traditional norms. I had never imagined it. My mother, Ruth's daughter, wanted more for herself than serving a white family. And so she didn't see any other possibilities for herself in Wilmington in 1963 when she graduated from high school. And I'm sure many of you all know that backstory on Wilmington that has come to the forefront in the last few years, history that people did not talk about for a long time. The 1898 incident where an integrated governing group was overthrown via the only successful coup in United States history. Between the end of the Civil War and 1898, Wilmington had nurtured a class of successful blacks who owned businesses and occupied elected seats in local government. After the coup, prospects for black Wilmingtonians were bleak, and my mother's journey, which began in 1945, which was actually only 47 years after the 1898 coup, her journey reflected that. So she took a bus to New York City 3 days after graduating from Williston High School in Wilmington, a segregated high school. She eventually became the first black teller at a bank in Brooklyn. And after she and my father, Jessie Mae's son, Ivory, were divorced, she remarried William Jones, who was Hattie Mae's son. But now back to this photo. Let's study it for a moment. I have to admit, I am extremely ambivalent about this photo. Madeir was included in the family photo like she was part of the family, but she really wasn't. Their family, that doctor's family trajectory was very different from Madeir's, and her physical proximity to them did not bridge the gap in their worlds. Now fast forward, here's some photos from my college years. The hard work and sacrifices of Ruth, Jessie Mae, and Hattie Mae created the opportunity for me to attend college. I went to Yale, so you see the little dot, that's not Duke. That's not Duke. It's Yale. I know it looks like Duke. That's Yale. So I actually, it's an interesting story. I don't have time to tell the whole story, but I applied to a lot of schools, and I did not apply to Yale, and my mother insisted, after I had done all my other applications, she insisted that I apply to Yale, and I tried to get out of it, dodged it a little bit, but felt some signs from God that I should apply. So I went ahead and applied, had my heart set on going to another school, and I ended up not liking the other school when I visited it, and went to visit Yale, loved it. We got the financial aid together, even though Ivory, my father, had never paid his child support. He said he would pay half the tuition. And I learned, after all of that, I learned that my mother, when she graduated from that segregated high school in Wilmington in 1963, the valedictorian attended Yale. And she had nurtured a secret dream to send her child to Yale since 1963. And so I've included a few photos of myself here, including with my sorority sisters. You can see I pledged Delta Sigma Theta, and I'm sure you all know about the Divine Nine Black Greek letter organizations. The mayor's, she's representing tonight her beloved Zeta Phi Theta. Yeah, I know y'all know your mayor don't play about Zeta Phi Theta. Any reflection of a century of Black history commemorations would be incomplete without paying homage to the astonishing vision of the young college students who formed these organizations in the early 20th century. For Delta Sigma Theta, it was 22 young women at Howard University who created the organization to focus on sisterhood, scholarship, and service. And there isn't enough time here to talk about the amazing individual contributions and achievements of just those 22 women in many humanitarian and professional endeavors. But additionally, the organization they created is still here 113 years later as a global organization with over 350,000 members and over 1,000 chapters. And the other 8 Black Greek letter organizations have similar and indelible impacts on the United States and various corners of the globe. And so this photo also depicts a critical moment in my personal journey. You see the little handwritten notes up here. I wrote that about 2 years after I graduated from Yale, which I actually left Yale without a clue, going back to this idea of HBCUs and the tremendous impact that they have. I think that they do maybe a better job on grooming and providing focus and some direction. So I left Yale clueless, and after about 2 years of bumping around, I sat down and wrote a vision for myself, where I said, I want a career that involves a commitment to positive social, physical, and economic transformation. I want to work with people to develop a better future. I like to communicate with others about ideas. I want a career in public service that combines several of my interests. So that has guided me throughout my career, which the mayor talked about during the intro. But also it was such a tremendous privilege and blessing to be able to sit down and write out what I wanted to do, because Jessie Mae, Hattie Mae, and Ruth, they didn't have that luxury. They had to try and survive and feed their family, create the foundation for the future. Now, while I don't have time to recount my full journey, here's some photos depicting some moments that have made the history books. After graduating from UNC-Chapel Hill's master's program in urban planning, I married this Texan right here, Rodney Taylor, and moved to San Antonio. I worked on a variety of affordable housing and revitalization initiatives as a municipal employee, then at a nonprofit organization before I won a seat on the San Antonio City Council in 2009. And then in 2014, the accidental mayor chapter begins. I really did not intend to become mayor. I became mayor following a vacancy in the seat by my predecessor, who went on to he left the mayor seat to become President Obama's HUD secretary. And so the charter said that in the event of a vacancy, the the mayor had to be selected from the council by the council. He had a year left on his term. And really, I think what happened is no one wanted to give the advantage to another person in an election a year later. You know, you have a year under your belt as mayor, people get used to you being mayor. But everybody, their calculation was, well, San Antonio is 7% black, so she can never win a citywide election, so let's just let her occupy a seat for a year. But I ended up winning the election. So, much to my surprise and everyone else's surprise. But what is interesting about how I landed in the seat, I always thought that I had what it took, the experience, the passion, the drive, the knowledge to be mayor, but I didn't think that I could win a citywide election. And I had spent a year or so before my predecessor left the seat telling people who suggested that I run that I want to be the mayor, but I don't want to run for mayor. And then guess what? From my mouth to God's ears, he gave me exactly what I said, what I put into the atmosphere. I became the mayor without having to go through a citywide election, and then once people saw what I could do in the seat, then I ran and won a term of my own in 2015. As was mentioned, first black mayor of San Antonio. San Antonio became the largest American city at that time to have a black woman mayor. Thankfully, some sisters have followed since. Los Angeles, though, they're giving her a hard time. She had a rough time, y'all. Chicago and Philadelphia have, since the time that I served, black women have become mayor of those large cities. And you all know how wonderful it is to have a sister serving here in Carrboro, an all-American city. Maybe not 1 million people, but still an all-American city. So while Hattie Mae did not live to see this, Jessie Mae died a year after I became a council member, and my dear Ruth, she lived to see me be elected as mayor of San Antonio. I never imagined this path for myself, so I know that those 3 women could not have imagined it. The 3 years as mayor were 3 of the most stressful yet exhilarating years of my life. There were many policy achievements through my leadership, but what I am most gratified by was setting an example for little black and brown girls who saw my face on the news and began to think, I can do that. In fact, I remember during Black History Month, I had worn this outfit that was a little bit weirder. I had like this scarf that I tied in a weird way, and there were a lot of photos of me with it. And when Black History Month came, someone sent me a picture of their daughter dressed up with the scarf. The same way she was me for Black History Month. So I think that was the most important contribution. Okay, this lovely family photo is taken at the party the night that I lost re-election in 2017. Now, while I was upset that night, Rodney was not upset. It was a whole hotel ballroom. Everybody was looking confused as the results were coming in. The eyes were big. I looked at Rodney. He was grinning from ear to ear. He was done. He was done. He was ready for me to do something else. But so the loss created an opening for me to go back to school, which I had contemplated actually for over 10 years. While I was mayor, I served on the board of Houston-Tillotson University, which is an HBCU in Austin. I developed a love and an interest for these special institutions, and I purposed in my heart that I want to become president of one. The president of HT had attended an executive doctoral program at University of Pennsylvania, and she told me about it. And in 2018, I applied and was accepted. I spent the next 2 years learning about higher education management and writing a dissertation on board governance at HBCUs. And the photo here is me attending my virtual commencement because I finished in 2020. Y'all know what was happening then. So moving on in my journey. These photos are from the Rusk College chapter of my life and career. From 2020 to 2023, I was president of a small HBCU in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Rusk College was founded in 1866 by Methodist missionaries to educate freed slaves. The impact of this institution and others like it on American society absolutely cannot be overstated. Besides their educational impact, these institutions were central to Black cultural preservation and the creation of Black political and social leadership. I know some of you in this room were blessed to attend one of the 5 HBCUs in North Carolina. In fact, Michelle graduated from Winston-Salem State, right?
That's you.
All right. And your education there was instrumental to your advancement, and that you learned the importance of service to your community. Those are some of the amazing aspects that our HBCUs provide. I do wonder, however, if my family's trajectory would have been different if there had been an HBCU in Wilmington, North Carolina, where my family members would have been able to actually literally see what it looked like to go to college and have been able to more easily access it. Our collective continued support for the 100 or so HBCUs that still exist is critical to continuing progress of our nation. While African Americans have made so many strides in the last century, the current policy environment does not guarantee continued incremental progress with each generation, as my family and many others experience. A whole big group of people have been left behind, and currently many are finding it difficult to build on their parents' achievements. Black History Month is the time to reflect on the sacrifices of our Madiers and Hattie Mays and Jessie Mays, but not to rest on our laurels. In my humble opinion, many of our forefathers who did not have access to education placed more value on it than those of us today who've been to college. We must change that, as our country needs more citizens who are capable of analyzing data, contributing to the economy, and capable of compassion for citizens who may not share common backgrounds. A recent memorable historical moment was when my official mayoral portrait was installed in San Antonio's Hall of Mayors. Now, San Antonio is older than the United States. So if you go there to visit, let me tell you, you can easily find me, because when you go down that hall of 300 years of mayors, guess what? I jump out. I'm the only one. I'm the only Black face on the wall. I shared that special moment with some of my sorority sisters from Delta Sigma Theta in San Antonio. I wish that Jessie May, Hattie May, and Ruth could have been there to see it, because they're the ones that made it possible. Because of the foundation that Jessie May, Hattie May, and Ruth created for my parents and me, my husband and I have been able to provide a wealth of opportunities for our daughter Morgan. She's a senior at Florida A&M, and an HBCU that has created many distinguished leaders. I know y'all know about them Rattlers. She looks forward to attending law school and making her mark on the world. When she has children, I will be for her something that I couldn't imagine: an educated grandmother. The incremental change that my family has experienced are reflective of not just the Black American experience, but the American experience. And during Black History Month, we often focus on those famous firsts and movement leaders, but today I just want to remind us not to forget the everyday courage of our grandparents and those who made progress during times when their options were severely limited. They couldn't dream certain things for themselves, but they dreamed them for their kids and their grandkids. Yale wasn't a possibility for my mom, but her dream and her work made it a reality for me. Besides the impact of those not famous giants like Nana and Madier, my comments today also underscore the historical impact and continued relevance and importance of institutions like our Black colleges, Black organizations, and churches, which supported incremental change that occurred over that century and were also instrumental to see changes like the Civil Rights Movement. Let's continue to nurture and invest in those institutions that brought us through many dark days. Despite the current efforts to minimize the contributions of both famous and unknown heroes in the struggle, we are all called to honor those forebears by continuing to fight for change. While we tend to focus on current laws and policy changes that are needed, I also encourage us to look inward and identify personal choices, habits, and investments that each of us can make that contribute toward lasting change, and that our descendants would look back on in 100 years and be grateful for. That's it. Let's keep in touch.
Of the North Carolina House of Representatives, representing District 58 in Guilford County since January of 2017. Mr. Quick currently serves as the House Democratic Whip. I'm not sure what that means, but he gonna let us know, hopefully. All right. A leadership role in the state legislature. In that capacity, he works with party members and legislative priorities. Throughout his tenure, he has been appointed to key committees, including appropriations, environment, pensions and retirement, and rules, calendar, and operations of the House. While in the State House, Mr. Quick has been blessed to climb the leadership ladder. He was elected vice chair of his freshman class. He was chosen to serve as a Democratic whip in 2019 and 2021. In addition to loving his ministry, which he is the senior pastor at Friendship Baptist Church in Lexington, North Carolina, and his work for North Carolina families in the State House. Before his election to the State House, Mr. Quick was deeply involved in local education. He served on the Guilford County Board of Education from 2004 to 2016, including multiple terms as vice chair, where he focused on improving public schools and supporting students and teachers. And I'll just throw this in here off script. He also was my boss, serving the Salvation Army of the Boys and Girls Club of Greensboro, North Carolina. In addition to public service, Mr. Quick is a longtime faith leader. He is an ordained Baptist minister, currently serves as senior pastor of Friendship Baptist Church in Lexington, North Carolina. He earned a degree in psychology from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. And since we have Divine Nine in here, I just throw it out there. He is a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. All right. His legislative work emphasizes education, funding, equitable opportunities, environmental stewardship, and support for working families. Mr. Quick lives in Greensboro and is a devoted father to his two daughters. However, the absolute loves of his life are his grandson, MJ, and his granddaughter, Amaya, who he calls Lil Honey. All right. Guiding Representative Quick in all that he does is the assurance found in his favorite scripture, Philippians 1:6, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will see it through until the day of Jesus Christ. Let's please give a warm welcome to Pastor and North Carolina House Representative Amos Quick.
Thank you all very much, and it's a blessing indeed to be here tonight. Thank God for Michelle. She is right. We work together at the Salvation Army Boys and Girls Clubs of Greensboro, where I served as the Chief Executive Officer, and Michelle was the Athletics Director. And she has always done a fabulous job. I was excited when she got in touch with me back in the fall of last year to invite me to be here, and I was excited to see her tonight for the first time in years. We now are both, well, I was going to say we both have gray hair, but I don't have hair. You have gray hair, I have a gray beard, so that is certainly a blessing to be here. Dr. Taylor, thank you so very much. As you were talking, I was just Googling, because I got here a little late, I was Googling, and certainly am honored to be sharing this presentation stage with someone as accomplished as you are, and I thank God for you, and I will continue to learn about you and the history maker that you are, and tell others about the history maker that you are. Certainly, I pray God's blessing continue upon you. Now, my resume is not nearly as impressive as Dr. Taylor's. I did not go to Yale. I've seen it on TV before. But I did not go to Yale. But I noticed there were some things that were common in our backgrounds. One being that the strong influence of our grandparents parents, in particular our grandmothers. My paternal grandmother, my father's mother, was a domestic in High Point, North Carolina. Believe it or not, she left Marlboro County, South Carolina, Bennettsville, where she was a teacher and educator. And the only work she could find in High Point, North Carolina was as a domestic for the Silver family. So here's this educated African-American woman who, when she moved to High Point, North Carolina, could not find or would not be hired into the local education system, so she found work as a domestic. And I do remember those days. That picture that you have up reminded me, brought back many memories of my grandma Picoya and the legacy that she instilled in all of us grandchildren, I being the oldest grandchild, but certainly a woman of faith who I believe God has used to lead me on the path of faith and to serve as a pastor. Again, I want to thank Michelle for the invitation. I'm so proud of many of the Boys and Girls Club staff that I work with, Michelle certainly being one of them. We've had other staff, Michelle, who we work with, Justin Luder, who ran for mayor of Kannapolis, North Carolina, and lost that race, Dr. Taylor, by about 150 votes. And so I hope he does it again. Jacqueline Robinson, who is now a leader in the Boys and Girls Club movement. Ebony Burnett, who now is running for school board in Guilford County, North Carolina. So there's a thread of success that goes through our organization. I've been asked to come tonight and speak on one of my favorite topics, and that is history, specifically African American history. I fashioned myself to be an amateur historian, so anytime I get the chance to talk about history, it is a blessing to me. And being a native of Greensboro, I'm privileged to live in a city that is well known for its black history and its civil rights legacy. In fact, most people, when they hear of Greensboro and civil rights and black history, their minds go to February 1st, 1960, where the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University Four, Greensboro has co-opted them now, call them the Greensboro Four, but they are known to those of us in Greensboro as the A&T Four, where they walked from their campus to the F.W. Woolworth's downtown, and there they added fuel and really lit the spark for the sit-in movement that led to open access to what was previously closed to us. But there's so much more history in Greensboro and so much more history to our state, and particularly this town, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Our theme for this evening is a century of black history commemorations. But with your indulgence, I want to go back a little bit further than a century, but I promise that I'll cover our theme. Let's go back to June 19th, 1865, Dr. Taylor, in your state of Texas, where an enslaved gathering, a gathering of enslaved people takes place in Galveston. The purpose of the gathering is that so those who are gathered can hear the reading of General Order Number 3. The people are weary, the people are tired, and they are confused as to why they've been called from their toilsome labor to gather in this particular time. History records them as slaves. However, I want to suggest this evening that we permanently do away with the term slaves, because slave is a descriptor of what they did, and slave takes away the humanity of the people who toiled in this way. When we're talking about the ancestors of Africans and African Americans, the term slaves takes away their humanity and reduces them to their condition. May I suggest, and I've seen happening in our country, that there's a groundswell of new terminology for those of our ancestors. There's new terminology for those who had been kidnapped and raped and beaten and used for their labor without compensation of any sort. And I suggest and I agree that the better term for them is enslaved people, because that term gives the humanity back to them. That term describes their condition, but also describes a resilient population that endured the worst that man can do to man and still came out with a pride and a determination, I would say, that's been unduplicated anywhere on earth. Slaves describes their condition, but these were people, enslaved people, and I would hope that we would learn to refer to them as such from here on. Brought to this land in 1619, Africans and African Americans worked hard on the land and built this nation on their backs. For 2.5 centuries, 246 years to be exact, slavery persisted in this country. On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all enslaved people, and I quote, are henceforth shall be free. But slaveholders in Texas withheld that news from those they kept bound. They were benefiting from the free labor of the people, and the last thing they wanted them to know was that they were free. That was until the first Juneteenth, June 19, 1865, when General Order Number 3 was read in Galveston, Texas, and the word quickly spread to the approximately 250,000 enslaved people in Texas that they were set free. History records some of the reactions of some of those who heard that general order. History says that Harriet Smith, who had been named that, recalled an immense chaos and joy when the news finally arrived on her plantation. History records that Laura Smalley, a name she had been given, she described that when she was told that she was free on her plantation in Belleville, Texas, that there was undescribable joy. Billy McCrae remembered the visual impact of seeing Union soldiers in blue uniforms riding along their horses with their cannons. History says that some of the people who heard this General Order Number 3 were shouting and celebrating. Others were crying and confused. They had been in fields, but now they wondered how could they live in houses. While others, they didn't need to hear it twice. They heard the news and celebrated briefly, and then went about the business of leaving their plantations and searching for loved ones who had been sold away and ripped away. And these people began to search and establish a new independent community wherever they landed. And all over the land, we saw new independent communities that would thrive. And in the South, all over the South, institutions that had our culture, institutions that served the purpose of rehabilitating and building up our people all over the South. Black colleges and universities and churches and businesses with black ownership began to sprout up, including here in North Carolina. Let me call a little bit of the roll. 1865, Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. 1866, Fisk University in Nashville, North Carolina, and I learned tonight, Russ College. 1867, St. Augustine's University in Raleigh. Fayetteville State University in Fayetteville, Morehouse College in Atlanta, and Howard University in Washington, D.C. 1867, Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, and just a little bit up the road, Barbara Scotia in Concord. 1868, Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. 1873, Bennett College in Greensboro. 1879, Livingstone College in Salisbury. 1881, Tuskegee University in Tuskegee, Alabama. 1891, the illustrious North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Michelle, I didn't forget about you, 1892, Winston-Salem State University.
Illustrious.
But not just colleges and universities.
He said he never heard North Carolina Central up there.
During this time, thousands of black-owned businesses and churches with black congregations also were founded and thrived. And then a little later, a little school in Durham, North Carolina Central. Black land ownership exploded for a time, including right here in Carrboro. Like in 1879, when Tony and Nellie Strayhorn built their log cabin on what is now Jones Ferry Road, making a living selling milk, butter, fruits, and vegetables. And at the turn of the last century, circa 1900, approximately 90% of black Americans lived in the South. Partly in response to their success from the Emancipation Proclamation and the Juneteenth reading of General Order Number 3, there arose within our country a harsh and brutal reaction, the onset of Jim Crow segregation, disenfranchisement of black, mostly male voters, and systemic racial violence. Whereas 1865 through 1877, the era called Reconstruction, could be labeled as the glory days of black power and success in legal, political, and social statuses, and whereas 1890 through 1910 could be referred to as the glory days of black land ownership and business explosion, with an estimated 25% of all southern acreage owned by blacks at this time, the period that followed, roughly through 1915, saw brutality and pain. Renegade South says that during the Reconstruction era, the social fabric of Orange County, this county, was shredded by violence. The Orange County Justice Coalition, in conjunction with the Equal Justice Initiative, reports that, quote, terror lynchings during this period were violent and sometimes public acts of torture conducted to traumatize black people. One name that ought to be known in all of our history books as a victim of this violent racial terrorism in this area is Manly Macaulay, who was memorialized at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. Right here in this county, Orange County, the Orange County Community Remembrance Coalition says that former plantation owners and the white power structure, again I quote, devised new forms of enslavement and laws restricting black movement and political advancement, end quote. However, there were glimmers of light. There was a black justice of the peace here at that time, and there was a black police officer. Thank God that this coalition has been adamant about remembering this dark period of our state's history by making sure that these stories are forever told, and by recently placing a marker that provides a snapshot of this awful history. Looking for a way to escape the racial violence that was sweeping the South at this time, many African Americans participated in both waves of the Great Migration. This was a massive movement of an estimated 5 to 6 million blacks from the rural South to the more urban North and Midwest primarily, although many moved out west as well. The first wave of the Great Migration was from 1910 to 1930, and the second wave of the Great Migration lasted from 1940 to 1970, which is not that long ago. The movement of people and people power utterly transformed the social, political, and cultural fabric of America, while at the same time having a massive impact on black families and black life in both the North and South. They said country folk moved uptown, and in the North it was said you could tell a Southern transplant by their cheap luggage and the straw that hang behind their ears. And what was left for those of us who remained in the South was a constant fight and a victorious struggle for our full rights to be recognized. And while there are more famous names that are etched in history, like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, E.D. Nixon, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Thurgood Marshall, James Farmer, Daisy Bates, Medgar Evers, A. Philip Randolph, and the like, let us also never forget those who have and continue to fight locally, like the namesake of this building that we're in, Robert Bob Drakeford, who made history as Carrboro's first black mayor, elected in 1977 and serving until 1983. And let us not forget Brother Braxton Foushee, who has helped lay the foundation when it comes to equality here in Orange County. It all began in 1960 when he too sat down at the Colonial Drug Store, then both the store and the lunch counter, and requested to be served. Let us never forget people like Velma Perry, who helped document the history of the historically black neighborhood of Tin Top, and the current history maker who's in our presence tonight, our mayor, Barbara Foushee. Upon these broad shoulders, we and future generations stand. We are witnessing a great transformation in our country. Some are concerned about where our country is headed. But those of us who recognize and know the history of African Americans and the history of the Rainbow Coalition, who have often come together to save this nation in times of turmoil financial, times of turmoil racial, times of turmoil social, know that the words that James Weldon Johnson wrote will soon again become true. God of our silent tears, God of our weary years, thou who hast brought us thus far on our way, thou who hast by thy might led us into thy light, keep us forever in thy path we stay. Edgar Guest wrote a poem that was a favorite poem of Dr. George Washington Carver down in Tuskegee, Alabama. The name of the poem is entitled Equipment. And no matter how old we get, no matter how tired we get, we should remember that they that wait on the Lord will mount up with wings. They will mount and fly like eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and they shall not faint. Brother Guest said it this way: figure it out for yourselves, my lads. You've got all that the greatest of men have had. 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain to use if you would be wise. With this equipment we all began, so start for the top and say I can. Look them over, the wise, the great. They take their food from a common plate. With similar laces they tie their shoes, and you can be successful if only you choose. So figure it out for yourselves, my lads. You've got all that the greatest of men have had. 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain to use if you would be wise. We stand on the shoulders and we stand on the precipice of greatness. Throughout all of our trials, tribulations, and our struggles, North Carolina, Orange County, and North Carolina as a state have a great history, a great African-American history of which we can be proud. Started in 1891, that school on East Market Street in Greensboro, North Carolina, has now become the largest historically black college and university in the nation. Because we have kept our hand and our shoulder to the plow, leaning on an everlasting God, remembering grandparents like those of Dr. Taylor and mine who struggled against injustice in order to pave the way that we might stand where we stand. But Dr. Taylor, I'm sure you will agree that your grandmother and my grandmother didn't pave the way for us to get where we are and stop. But there's some more road that needs to be paved. There's some more successes that need to be had. There are future generations who applaud our success, but wait their turn. And I tell the church that I pastor all the time, I'm your current pastor. And if I do what I'm supposed to do, there will be one who comes behind me who will walk on the road that we pave together. So I close my remarks tonight by saying this: we are the current recipients of God's grace. But if we do what we're supposed to do, we'll pave more road that future generations can walk upon. And someday we'll be able to look down from heaven and see what our Lord has done. Glory, hallelujah, amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you both, and I think I have a question for both of you. Dr. Taylor first. Actually, I also mentioned that tonight at 9 o'clock. I don't work for PBS, but they're airing a documentary about the Wilmington riot tonight on PBS, on North Carolina TV. So my question is about that. I was wondering if any of your grandmothers had stories that were passed down from that time, because when Wilmington, of course, before the riot, I think it was the first city that actually had elected a black person, and so I was wondering if you had any stories about that. And then I wanted to ask, in your pastor role, if you can talk a little bit about the change in the black church, in black culture, and what do you see going forward in terms of what we can do to kind of stop I guess people are moving out of church in a larger sense, but also in the black church. What do you think we can do?
Well, unfortunately, my family never passed down any of those types of stories, and I came to know about the 1898 riot much later in life. And so I remember saying something to my mom about, civil rights movement in those years, and she, there were a lot of things that weren't talked about. In those days, people were not as open and the trauma that they had, sometimes they just want to forget. So actually, I never learned that when I was young. I didn't learn it, even though I studied, took so many African American history classes at Yale. I never learned it in college. It was only much later that I learned about it. It's very unfortunate. Actually, I talked to people in Wilmington who said they went to school there and they never heard anything about it. Yeah.
Just briefly, while I was a student at UNC-Wilmington, I befriended Joe Wright, who was a member of the Wilmington 10. And that story is a tragic story in and of itself, but being a friend of him and him talking about how 1898 wasn't as long ago as we thought it was, because some of the same power structures were still influencing what happened to the Wilmington 10. To your question, as a pastor, certainly you have to notice that less and less people are coming to church. We have a generation of people who are questioning the need for church. And my humble opinion is that the church got away from its mission in a lot of ways. The church became more than Christ intended it for it to be. We became almost a social club. And we kind of took the core mission, which is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to convert sinners into those who are saved. That always has to be the core mission of the church. Many times we as pastors and leaders have counted our effectiveness by the number of people who are in the seats, when the actual evaluation, the ultimate evaluation, and the only one that really is going to matter is if we hear God say, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant." And so the answer to that, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that we can't continue in the way we're going with church leaders wanting to be celebrities and churches wanting to be viral. We have a core mission, and our core mission is the gospel and to make the gospel live for people while helping them at the same time solve the issues and problems of their life, but only doing that with the gospel as the foundation. That's my humble opinion. And you could go to a convention and you'll find 50 other opinions as well, but that's what I believe has happened.
Thank you both. And I guess as a quick follow-up. What do you think the difference is in how we found out about the Tulsa riot and why that was always, I guess, or maybe not always, but was more in our consciousness than the Wilmington?
That's a great question. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that. I think sometimes it comes down to the academicians that are doing the research and the outlets and channels that they get in order to publicize things. And so I don't know that there was a concerted effort to actually dig up the history in Wilmington and to share it, because it was, I'm sure, counter to the narrative that the community had created for itself. So I don't know, but I would guess that sometimes it has to do with who's actually discovering and sharing the story.
I actually went to the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa uprising. I was there in the Greenwood neighborhood when that 100th anniversary took place a couple years ago. I think that they never stopped telling the story, and that there were descendants who were there, who had lived there, who were still alive. There may be a bit of a difference for us here. We have, as you have pointed out, we have stopped telling that story. They never stopped telling that story in Tulsa, which is what drew me to even go out of curiosity. I had no connection to Tulsa or to what happened, but the fact that that story had been repeated over and over is kind of what drew me to go there.
And I also, just random facts, I was thinking back, my speech, I kind of go over in my mind what ifs, and I talked about what if there had been an HBCU in Wilmington. I actually don't know the reason why that never happened, other than, what happened in 1898 would indicate that it was not a hospitable environment. But since several of the schools started right after the war, 1866, you still had, that period until 1898, and I just find it really curious that given all the progress there, that there was not an HBCU founded there. But also, I recently learned that the first HBCU was almost created in New Haven, Connecticut, but some Yale faculty came out and blocked it. I thought that was pretty interesting.
So I have a question. First of all, thank you both for your stories and different way you gave us a nice history of, I guess, North Carolina going back and coming forward, and then just your trajectory. I took a picture of your wish or what you were thinking you were going to do, your manifestations, and I thought that was really good because I've done research on young black girls. My PhD is in school stress and the school experience. School stress. I forgot the rest of the thing. It's been 4 years ago, so now I'm like, what was it? But my girls, actually, one goes to High Point, one goes to Davidson, so it's good to see them from high school to college now. And what I'm thinking as I'm a transplant to North Carolina, the history here is rich. And one of the things that I'm always wondering, we know how to move forward. We've done it, Hayti, Tulsa, Rosewood, all the different places, Ocean Hill, Brownsville, New York City, Brooklyn. But we get there, eminent domain or some other thing, fires take us out. How do we go forward, right, and have a sort of a guard around us? Given, I haven't seen it done yet, because every time we move forward, we go back because of some law or something, and you being in legislative before and then pastor, like just looking at those roles, how do we move forward, protect ourselves, and continue? Because it always happens. So I know that's loaded and you may not know, but some thoughts about it.
The pastor may have way more to say about this than me, but if I could share, this is my personal opinion, and it's not probably popular, what I'm about to say, but I think the way you framed it is so important because we have to recognize that we have agency. And I remember some years ago when I was the council member in San Antonio and I would give speeches for Black History Month, I would challenge people and say to them, you know, the church Rodney and I attended in San Antonio was founded in the late 1800s and now occupies a full city block. But all the folks who attended that church have moved 20 miles out, okay? So I would say, are we honoring the domestics and laborers who somehow managed to build this brick structure and create an institution that serves this community by deciding to pick up our marbles and go 30 miles out? So part of, as you described, protecting it is investing. Those decisions that we make to invest and to sustain institutions, neighborhoods, churches. I think some of that is on us. Obviously, there are systems and, you know, there's a lot of reasons why things turn out the way they do, but I think sometimes we've given up our agency and our power in protecting some of those things.
So I will speak as a legislator.
Yes.
One of the things that we have to have is we have to have people elected who are not afraid to represent us. That is not at the exclusion of anyone else. I represent 90,000 people in Guilford County, and I'm 90,000 people's representative. I have to represent the needs of 90,000 people. However, part of my platform was also that we have to recognize as a nation that African Americans have been treated specifically harsh. There was recently a Supreme Court decision that said with surgical precision, the legislature tried to disenfranchise black voters. We cannot be afraid to resist that when it's surgical precision that targets us. Stokely Carmichael said a long time ago, black visibility is not black power. Just having a black face there does not mean that they're going to represent the interests of our community. We also have to be unafraid to stand up and say there are some interests that are unique to the black community. Let's look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the anti-DEI. Well, that has been that a black face has been put on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, when statistics shows us that the primary beneficiaries have been white females. We have to have, as I spoke about earlier, a rainbow coalition that stands up for each other while also recognizing there are some specific initiatives that have targeted certain groups. We can look at our immigrant communities now who have been specifically targeted. So there must be specific actions that push back against unfair and inhumane treatment of any people. So we have to have leaders who are not afraid to stand up as African Americans and say, this is what this does to my community. And this is why we have to fight and resist that. That does not mean we're saying that we are anti-anybody, but we have to be willing, brave, and courageous enough to stand up for that. The business community does it. When tax policy comes in, you'll find corporations going crazy about this is how this is going to affect. Teachers do it when we put policies and put mandates on teachers that you have to teach this. They'll stand up and they'll say, listen, you got to understand this is what this does. There should be no shame in African American leadership and our allies standing up and saying, this is going to specifically target this population, and we have to resist it.
It's the resist part that I like. I think that's where we are losing people. I don't see it as often as, I guess, back in the 60s when you look back there. So I'm just wondering what it would look like today, given everything that's happening. That's just my two-part, because that was great. You know, it's great to hear it, right, when other people, you hear them say it, and then it's like, where's your action to it?
Just recently, the Board of Elections said that North Carolina A&T, UNCG, these colleges could not have an early voting site on their campus. That spurred those students into action. They marched down to the Board of Elections and they voted in numbers we haven't seen before. We also recognize this new generation and younger generations than I am, that they are using that technology, they are getting the word out, they are mobilizing, they are doing those things. And I think we're going to see a new wave of activism that old fellas like me, we can't catch on to, but there's a spark that's been lit with our younger generations across races. You know, what's happening in our country now is affecting across races, and you're seeing these coalitions coming. You be careful, you all, I'm gonna let Dr. because you give a preacher a microphone. Dang.
Okay.
Other questions? Oh, one page. Oh.
Okay. I just want to start off by saying thank you both very much for your presentation tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this may relate more to Braxton, to she and me than the others because we grew up in the same community. What I'm missing is there's a relational shift between our culture. And growing up here, and what I mean by that, for example, I could nod to you, and what it says very subtly is, I see you. What I'm missing as I move forward, I'm missing that part where, for example, went to New York, and we have this habit of, well, around here, you say hi to people, you see them on the street, you may not know them, but you acknowledge that they're there. Hey, how you doing? And you keep on moving. Now, I'm in New York, and walking down the street with my nephew, and I do the very same things. Hold up. In New York, you don't do that. You see? So, what I'm sensing is that loss where I could nod, I could give the point. Bryson, I see you, and we haven't said a thing. Are the sisters rolled up in church? Oh, man. And there's a presence about them. And they don't have to say a thing. It's almost like royalty has walked in the house and just been there. They established their presence. So I come to the question is, am I the only one who feel that we love, for example, there's a word for it, the illusion of being inclusion, of the inclusion. Now, back in the day, I could just nod at Brax, moving on down the road. I see you. Other people want to say, hey, how you doing? And you keep on moving. But now, I don't sense that. It seems like it's becoming more and more foreign to me. And you get to the place like I'm in New York, you're reluctant to have that kind of connection. So what I want you all to address, is that something that I'm just feeling? Or is it is an evolution of who we are now as a culture?
I definitely, my opinion is that that's regional. You know, in New York, yes, that's how people act. I'm born and raised in New York. A funny story that a gentleman who was an alum of Russ College told me. I met him at some event at the college, and he was also from New York, and he was saying how, you know, how it was so strange for him coming from Queens and then going to college in Mississippi. And he said, and one time after I had been in college about 4 years, I made the mistake when I went back to Queens and I just saw somebody on the street and I said, how you doing? And he said, the person said, what's up, you know me? You know me? And the person was like, ready to. And he said, oh, I forgot where I was. I'm in New York. I'm not in Mississippi anymore. So I think those are some of the cultural norms in different regions. I haven't specifically felt that sense of loss. I do think it depends on the setting. Sometimes people seek each other out when you're in a setting where, you know, maybe there aren't a lot of people who look like you. I still kind of feel those kind of connections. That's my experience.
So I've always lived in the South. I always lived in North Carolina. I never lived anywhere, so it's kind of second nature for me to do that. But I will say this, I'm also noticing, even in the South, that there's a greater disconnect as we rely on technology to communicate with each other. I'm also noticing that we still will do the nod and we still will do the point. But it used to be a time you could get some further communication. You could keep talking about how's your family doing, even if you didn't know the person. How's your family doing? And this, you recall standing in grocery store lines and having long conversations. I've kind of noticed that stuff is going away too. As Michelle introduced me and talked about the fact that I have 2 grandchildren, I get a little concerned about the world, that how they're so, let me coin a phrase here, how they're so disconnectedly connected. That they have access to each other. You know, we get texts now. Someone texted me this morning at 5 o'clock this morning. I'm wondering, what is wrong with you? But people, because they have that access to you, we turn into a 24-hour society, but we don't communicate with each other. We don't talk to each other. So we'll still get the nods and the points, but just kind of notice the deeper connection and the deeper conversation is being lost all over the country. And again, I can only speak for the South because this is only where I live. But I've been a little concerned about our humanity and the human connection that we're starting to miss out on.
And one last thing, I was listening to Dr. Joy DeGroot, and she had this image that's almost spiritual, where she talks about when you look at the human eye, you're surrounded by the whiteness of the pupil, but the vision, well, you're surrounded by the whiteness, but the vision is in the pupil. And that and the light that you see through the pupil is what you embrace. And some of us, like mine, are wearing glasses. Sometimes I have to adjust that vision. But I constantly hope as we move forward that we're able to, although we're surrounded by all of the distractions, that we still have the vision to look forward and embrace the future that our forefathers have afforded us. As Maya Angelou said, for example, I am the dream and the hope of the slave, and I owe something to my ancestry to become more than just a reflection of the moment. There's potential there. I am the past, the present. I make my future, and that continues to be etched out as I move forward. And I'd like to find out how you all feel about this whole notion that the pupil contains the image, the vision of our future. That's where we get our light from, and how do we embrace that with all of the distraction, Pastor, that we have with the new technology?
I think that's a great metaphor. Certainly, I think that there's a darkness that is kind of enveloping our surroundings now. And certainly, we do need more light of loving one another, light of being connected to one another, light of understanding that we're connected whether we want to be or not. And what affects my neighbor ultimately is going to affect me as well. So I think that's a good metaphor.
I'll just briefly say, I think the current moment demands a certain intentionality about going in a different direction, that we have to be intentional about sharing history, creating and modeling good practices for our children. We can't leave it to society as it is, or the school system or others to imbue our children with certain values. We just have to be so intentional about trying to shift the direction. Because I agree with the previous comments about how we're becoming disconnected from each other due to technology.
Good evening. I apologize, I missed your presentation. People. But, and Representative Reverend Quick, I followed you a long time, and I thank you for your work in the legislature. What I want to ask, because we have been on the same trajectory for some time, and today was a situation that we had elected officials, people aspiring to be elected officials come and speak to our ministers. What would you suggest that I, as president of the ministers group, say to all of our congregations in a sense of urgency right now? We are in a sense of urgency to what do we need to do as leaders, spiritual leaders? And this history you talked about with the church, this really happened years ago, that people were educated on who or where to go vote, and then they had assistance in helping to who to vote for. We can't do that. But our point is, how do we get people to go to the polls right now to vote? It's our duty, in my opinion, as a spiritual leader in the community. And it's not happening. I don't know who's announcing. I'm ready to go on Facebook and watch everybody's service and see who announced that the early poll, the polls are open. I mean, I walked in here tonight, it's open. But who is telling people, you gotta go vote? Nobody's doing it. I just want to know what your position is. I know you're a pastor, so
Sure.
you gotta have a thought.
I do. One that I don't know is a solution. I have a thought, but I don't know that I have a solution. My thought is that as we cry loud and spare not and yell from the rooftops, the importance of voting. There are several candidates that I'm helping right now. I don't have an opponent, thank God, in this election cycle. No primary, no general opponent. And so many candidates have asked me for help. And what I've said to them is, stop coming to our churches, making these pop-up visits, because at this point in time, candidates have to understand it's really life and death. I don't mean to be melodramatic or speak in hyperbole. Let's think about this. 2025, we had a global pandemic that affected every community all over the earth. And there were some politicians who did not take it seriously or took it seriously too late. The ramifications of having people in office who do not understand the importance of serving is such that we have learning loss in our schools. We have people who died that probably should not have died, medically I'm talking about, not in the spiritual sense. Medically should not have died, because we have people who were more concerned about being elected than about serving. That turns people off. So, what I say, if you want to come to my church, you can't come during service. We'll put together a program for you to come, and you can come and I'll acknowledge, hey, this is Joe Smith, he's running for school board, but you're not gonna get the microphone during service. You can come, we'll put together a program that will have people come, have our members to come, so that we can only talk about the importance of public service and elected officials. I think our congregants get turned off by seeing the politicians come in, waving and putting some money in their offering and leaving and assuming that they have their vote. There has to be a connection that we let our congregation see, that we take it seriously because it's really life or death, and that we push our congregation to take it seriously by attending these special sessions. Now that's just my opinion. That's my opinion.
But not during the regular service.
I don't do it at my church during the regular service. No, not they don't get the microphone. They can come in and stand up and, but not doing they don't get the microphone.
I know you didn't hear my presentation, but I was an elected official in another state. So I spent 8 years at the municipal level and had a very tense relationship with the faith-based community in my own backyard, even though I'm a woman of faith and I, wanted to be in deep partnership with the congregations and leadership. I think some of the challenges I experienced go back to what Representative Quick mentioned earlier about people who want to, they want to be famous through their pulpit, and not necessarily, they don't understand the concept of service, so they have a hard time helping their congregation point towards people who would be great public servants. So certainly at this moment, it's the 11th hour. I'm not sure what needs to happen now, but going back to my earlier comments about intentionality, I think many of our faith leaders can lead in a more intentional way as it relates to civic engagement and getting involved in the communities that they should be serving through their church, and having a broader idea of what that looks like. Making sure you understand what the elected officials can and can't do, because that was the other thing that I had a challenge with. People really didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, and so their expectations didn't really match what I was able to do as a council member. So I think a constant information feed to people, because even though they have these phones with all this information, y'all know how it works, the algorithm. You click on something one time and then for all eternity, you get the information, related to that one sliver and slice of life, opinion, and data. And people need to know much more than that. And so I certainly think faith leaders can serve a role in ensuring that people are educated about the issues, about what the different levels and layers of government do and can't do, and what they can do.
One other thought came in my mind as Dr. Taylor was speaking. We have to be informed, first of all. The more we know about the issues, the more it generates a motivation for us to tell our country. We have to understand that as spiritual leaders, there was a time, and you recall, that we were the most trusted voice in our community. And that was because we took the time to be informed and to be educated about what the issues are. Take for an example, education. The biggest budget item in the North Carolina state budget is education. It's about 52% of our budget. But how much do we, as faith leaders who have influence over a large number of people, how much do we really dig into the issue of education so that we can come out and not just be a voice, but be an educated voice, so that we can guide our congregations as much as we can into how to make a change and make a difference. And so that's kind of the root, again, and certainly you come to my church and you find a whole lot of stuff that I wish was different and we were doing better. But one of the things that I'm adamant about is that we have a session where we go over the issues before people go to the polls. Now that doesn't mean, listen, it's not the most attended session. I'm making no illusion that I've got a whole packed church, but the opportunity is there to be educated, and that's all that I think that we can do, and be informed about the issues ourselves. There have been so many times I've been to churches and heard a pastor or a leader say something, and as a legislator, I'm sitting there thinking, that's just not right. That's not how that happens. That's not how that works. But by then, it spreads like wildfire.
Oh, yeah.
How do we get our great brothers money away from them and put it back in public schools?
We get money away from,
Yeah, because, well, that's why I call them Republicans. Because all of them are white. I mean, how do we slow this train down between private schools and public schools to get the money back to where it should be?
I was kind of left behind on this one, but I really don't know the answer. I was shocked when I moved here on some of the programs, but so I'll let you answer that. But well, I will say I work in higher education, which is extremely well funded. And I really admire North Carolina's commitment to funding higher education. But what can I put on my urban planner hat for just a second before I pass the mic back to you? And I think, in a way, it goes back to, I don't have the answer on how we change, make a quick pivot.
Well, it's going to be
slow. It's going to be slow. Part of it goes back to the neighborhood level. The neighborhoods are, everybody has self-segregated. And so, I want the money for my kids in this place. So, I think that's part of, yes. So I think if we could figure out ways to have neighborhoods that have more of a socioeconomic mix, that would lend itself towards people being more willing to sit at the table and talk about resources for, the schools. That's kind of my urban planner's opinion on the, where we've gone, not just in North Carolina, but throughout the nation on K through 12. But perhaps you can educate us more.
well, specifically to North Carolina, we have to educate people who will stop this bleeding of state resources into private schools. In North Carolina, we have about well over $500 million, $600 million has been earmarked for private school vouchers. This was not at the request of wealthy parents, they did not ask for it, but it's at the detriment of the majority of our kids. The majority of kids in North Carolina still attend traditional public schools, not charter schools, not private schools. I'm not knocking charters or privates, but I am knocking the fact that we have a legislature that has elected to send, and when they get done with it, it will be over $1 billion through private school vouchers, which are not fair in their distribution, not fair in their execution, because private schools, Dr. Taylor and I could open a school, a private school, and we get to determine who our students are. Yeah. Traditional public schools have to educate who shows up at the door. And we're taking money away from traditional public schools and giving them to private schools who have the benefit of being able to say, no, you're not gonna be able to come to my school. My grandson, my best friend, he's my best friend in the world. He's only 7, but he's in 7 years has become my best friend. He has an autism diagnosis. He's thriving right now in traditional public school because traditional public schools have invested money in special education and IEPs and those type things. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but there's an investment in those type of programs. Well, Dr. Taylor and I decide tomorrow we're going to open a private school. We can say my grandson cannot be a student at this school. Charter schools also have more flexibility than traditional public schools in a different way. Charter schools don't provide transportation for the most part. Some of them now do, but when they started, they don't provide transportation. Well, that's an automatic barrier to some parents sending their kids to a different school. So we have to elect people, and I'm not leaning back on the old political backstop here. It's absolutely positively the truth. We have to elect people who value traditional public education as well as other forms of education. Again, private school parents did not come to the legislature and say, we need money. We just happened to give it to them. Hey, you want some money? Here's some money, and we gave it to them. The other thing, and then I'll stop, is that another barrier to where that money is going. Here's the one thing that we often forget. Poor people are taxpayers too. Poor people pay taxes as well. And so we're taking money from them and putting it into, it's wealth distribution in a large sense. It's wealth distribution. The other thing that I was going to say about private schools is this. They also can set their fees so high that the voucher money disqualifies the poor parent. So you come in my neighborhood and you say, Amos, we're going to give you, I don't know the number, so I'm make up a number. We're going to give you $10,000 so that your child can go to XYZ private school. Sounds good, sounds wonderful, until I come against the realization that it's going to cost me $40,000 a year. I can't afford that. And so automatically you put another barrier in for poor and working class parents under the guise of, we'll give these monies to anybody to help them get to a private school.
Do we have any more questions for our speakers this evening? No? All right. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Ivy Taylor and Representative Amos Quick. Again, we thank you all for spending your Monday evening with us and for being graciously to reschedule and come be with us in Carrboro. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this evening and joining us. Again, please come back this Sunday for our concert series. We'll have the Four Seasons, which is a gospel group. They are siblings that are going to be with us this Sunday at 3 p.m. right here at the Drakeford. So come back and join us again. Please feel free to stop by the table, take a water, take some swag items with you. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Mayor Foushee, for coming out, being with us this evening and supporting our programs. I thank you all so much. And again, we have a lot of other programs going on this month, so please make sure you go to our website, carrboro.nc.gov, to check us out. And also, we do repost these concerts and these lectures online on our Town of Carrboro YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out as well. Thank you all. God bless.